of trauma or previous surgery. This is very important. Use of steroid eye drop, a very important cause of post-cataract surgery ptosis. There are other contributory factors also in a post-cataract surgery ptosis. You may be asked this question in your viva. What are the causes of post-cataract surgery ptosis? Causes are trauma to nerve by superior rectus forceps or by aponeurosis, or by the use of steroid eye drops. Prolonged use of steroid eye drop may cause ptosis. Similarly, use of mascara also may contribute to the ptosis. So, getting a previous photograph is of great help if you are in doubt. Now we come to the ptosis examination. You are supposed to make a detailed ptosis chart in your examination whenever you are getting a case of ptosis. In that chart, you start first from a distance, examine patient from a distance. When you are examining patient from a distance, you check about head posture or face turn. Patient will be having chin elevation in severe bilateral ptosis or a face turn in unilateral ptosis which covers pupil. Then you go from above downward. You will have to always follow a system in your long cases, whatever system you are following. So here we are going from above downward. First of all, you check for frontalis action. This is important because if you are about to do a frontalis sling, then patient should have some frontalis action. Your eyebrow arching, you ask patient to forcibly arch the eyebrow or lift the eyebrow up. A normal frontalis action is around 10 millimeter or more than that. Then you check for lid crease and lid fold. Lid crease, because in a patient with moderate to good levator function, you will have a good lid crease and lid fold, obviously will be there. If a person is not having a prominent lid crease in the involved eye, then you label lid crease in the other eye. These all points should be recorded in both the eyes, right and left. So you are supposed to make lid crease in the position where it is there in normal eye. Lid margin, whether entropion or ectropion or any other marginal problem is there or not. So we are coming from above downward, from frontalis, eyebrow, lid crease, lid fold, lid margin. Now we are coming to the ptosis part per se. In that, palpable fissure examination, horizontal as well as vertical both. Vertical palpable fissure should be measured in 3 gauges, primary gauge, up gauge and down gauge in both the eyes. And horizontal palpable fissure should be recorded, especially in the case of blepharophimosis syndrome. This is an entity where you get narrowing of horizontal palpable fissure. Palpable fissure is also contributed by MRD1 and MRD2. If you join these two findings, then you will get palpable fissure. What is MRD1? Distance from upper lid margin to the corneal light reflex. And what is MRD2? From corneal light reflex to the lower lid margin. So if you join these two, this will be your palpable fissure. So then you calculate your amount of ptosis. How you calculate it? By two methods. One, by comparing two eyes palpable fissure in primary gauge. Suppose in right eye you have got 6 mm palpable fissure, vertical palpable fissure in primary gauge. In left eye you are having 9 mm. So in right eye you are having approximately 3 mm of ptosis. Got it? Similarly, it is done by the MRD1. MRD1 is distance from upper eyelid margin to the corneal right reflex. You compare both the MRDs and their difference will tell you about the ptosis. We will discuss this a little later on also. So amount of ptosis is given by these two methods. Then there are 3 other points: levator function, lid lag, leg ophthalmos. Then there are 3 phenomena: Bell's phenomena, Marcus-Gunn phenomena, and Elif phenomena. Then there are tests to check extraocular movement, corneal sensation, and Sharma's test. These are important because, as I told you, double elevator palsy is associated in many of the cases of ptosis. Corneal sensation, if it is poor, then it's a poor prognostic sign. Sharma test, again, dry eye patients are poor prognostic cases for ptosis. Then you'll have to check pupil and also vision. Pupil is miossed in Horner syndrome and it may be mediatic in third nerve palsy. So once again, to just briefly sum up these points, first you check patient from a distance to check for head posture, face turn. Then you go from above downward, frontalis action, eyebrow position, lid crease, lid fold, lid margin. Then palpable fissure and amount of ptosis by MRD method and palpable fissure. Then there are 3L, levator function, lid lag, leg ophthalmos. Then there are 3 phenomena, Bell's, Marcus gun, and Iliffe. Then there are 3 ancillary signs. What are these 3? Extraocular movement, corneal sensation, and Sharma test. And then there is pupil and vision. So once again, examine patient from a distance, eyebrow, lid crease, lid fold, lid margin, then palpable fissure, amount of ptosis, 3L, levator function, lid lag, leg ophthalmos, 3 phenomena, Bell's, Marcus gun, and Iliffe, 3 ancillary signs, extraocular movement, corneal sensation, and Sharma, and pupil and vision. Now there is one bad sign, it's a mnemonic. Bad sign stands for poor Bell's, B for B, A for corneal anesthesia, and D for dry eye. If any of these 3 is present, this signifies a poor prognosis for ptosis surgery. Now we come to the measurement part. As I told you, normal frontalis action is more than 10 millimeter. This is measured by asking patient to do a forcible brow arching. Eyelid crease, we have already discussed this. Absent eyelid crease is often accompanied by poor levator function. High lid crease, if it is present with deep lid sulcus, this is a sign of levator disinsertion. This is there in aponeurotic ptosis. So this is how lid crease is measured. If patient is not having good lid crease, you measure lid crease on other side and you try to reciprocate this lid crease while doing your surgery by making an incision. This is aponeurotic ptosis, where you get disinsertion or weakness of levator aponeurosis. Causes may be involutional, postoperative, or blepharochalasis. A very high lid crease, this is classical of aponeurotic. Absent upper eyelid crease or high lid crease, and very deep sulcus also, supratarsus sulcus is quite deep, and sometime you get cornea shining through the lid because there is no good aponeurosis to hide the cornea. So lid as such becomes very thin. MRD1, we have already discussed this. If lid margin is above the lid reflex, MRD is denoted as positive value. If ptosis is so severe that you are not able to see the corneal light reflex, then you will have to actually lift the eyelid up to visualize the corneal light reflex. There it is denoted as negative value. If you are supposed to lift lid by 1 mm to visualize the corneal light reflex as it is there in this particular patient, then MRD will be -1. MRD2, distance between lower eyelid margin and corneal light reflex. Ptosis is graded as mild, moderate, and severe. Mild if it is 2 millimeter, moderate if it is 3 millimeter, and severe if it is 4 or more. Palpable fissure height, we have already discussed it. Upper lid position, you must always remember it. It is upper lid covers 2 millimeter of cornea, superior limbus, and lower lid just touches the inferior limbus. This is important. MRD3, this is distance between corneal light reflex and central of upper eyelid in extreme upgauge. This denotes levator action. Better denotion of levator action is by margin limbal distance, also known as MLD, where distance between central of upper eyelid to 6 o'clock limbus in extreme upgauge is taken. Putamen takes this measurement in ptosis surgery, and this denotes levator function. Normally MLD is around 9 mm. Now, how to check for levator function? This is of great importance. You ask patient to look down, you place your thumb against the brow, place a ruler, then ask patient to look up. And it is graded as less than 4 millimeter poor, 5 to 7 fair, 8 to 12 good, and more than 12 is normal. You take your surgery decision about surgery by this levator action. How it is measured? You ask patient to look down, then place your thumb just over the brow, and then place your ruler and ask patient to look up and just check for lid excursion. In this particular patient, hardly there is any levator function, 2 to 3 millimeter. So this is the correct way of checking it. Now remember, your thumb should be directly opposing the brow. It should not be pulling the brow up, or it should not be pushing the brow down, because if you do that, you will get erroneous levator function. Incorrect way of doing it is, now see, the observer is pulling the brow up, and this will give you incorrect measurement. here observer is pushing the bro down while checking the elevator action. So again you will get erroneous measurement. So remember, your thumb should directly press over the bro. It should not pull it up, it should not push it down. Congenital ptosis, we all know it is malformation of levator function. Muscle is replaced by fibrous and adipose tissue, and it contributes that neither these muscles are able to contract properly, so you get ptosis, and nor it is able to relax properly. Because of this particular function, you get lid lag and down gauge, because these muscles are not able to relax properly, and this is a cardinal sign for congenital ptosis. If lid lag is there, then congenital ptosis ought to be there, but if there is no lid lag, then also patient may have congenital ptosis. In around 25 to 40% of congenital ptosis, patient may not have any lid lag. So you should remember this. So this is congenital ptosis, primary gauge, up gauge and down gauge. You can see in down gauge, this lid is not able to go down, not able to follow the eyeball. So lid lag in down gauge, this is classical of congenital ptosis. Measurement by MRD1, right eye 5 millimeter, left eye 1 millimeter. So how much is ptosis? How much is ptosis in right eye? 4 millimeter. Very obvious. Now by palpable fissure method, in right eye palpable fissure is 10 millimeter, in left eye it is 7 millimeter. In down gauge, palpable fissure is 8 millimeter in left eye and 5 millimeter in right eye. So how much is lid lag? This is the difference of palpable fissure in down gauge in both the eyes. So difference is 3 millimeter. This 3 millimeter is the lid lag in down gauge. So this is cardinal of congenital ptosis. Now amount of ptosis by MRD method in this particular case is 4 mm, and in by palpable fissure method in this particular case is 3 mm. Why this discrepancy? Because palpable fissure in right eye is 10 mm, in left eye it is 7 mm. So difference is 3 mm. So this catch is there, this discrepancy should not be there whenever you are making your ptosis chart. Ideally these two figures should match. Your examiner will try to check only these things, whether a person has done everything correctly or not. So there is something wrong in the measurement. But this is not always a rule. There are always some exceptions to the rule. So here, these measurements are not wrong, but there is something else which is happening in the left eye of this particular patient. This left eye is having lower lid lag or retraction also. You can see right eye lower lid is just touching the inferior limbus, while left eye it is going down by 1 mm. So this difference of two measurement is because of this lower lid sag or retraction. So because of this sag, palpable fissure has come up as 7 mm instead of 6 mm. And this has contributed to wrong finding of 3 mm ptosis, while ptosis is 4 mm. So if you are supposed to choose one method by which you have to do the ptosis examination, the best way is by MRD method. Because in palpable fissure method, more than 90% chances that you are correct, but sometime you may be wrong if patient is having abnormal lower lid position. Legophthalmos, we all know, inability to close eyelid completely. If there is preoperative legophthalmos, you must explain it to patient, because after surgery this will increase. Now Bell's phenomena. Normal Bell's is when cornea rolls up and out on attempted lid closure. Then there is an entity known as inverse Bell's. What is it? Here cornea rolls up and in. Then there is another entity known as reverse Bell's, where cornea rolls down on attempted lid closure. These all are types of normal Bell's phenomena. Then there is an entity known as perverse Bell's. Here sometime cornea goes up, sometime it goes down, like different type of behavior on different examinations. So this is known as perverse Bell's. You must know one fact also, that after surgery, a normal Bell sometime becomes reverse Bell's. Why it happens? Because after surgery, upper lid get some swelling or inflammation, and nature try to protect cornea by moving it down under the lower lid. So this is a normal phenomena. Sometime you check Bell's before surgery, it is normal. Eyeballs goes up and out, but after surgery, for temporary, say 1 or 2 weeks, it becomes reverse, and after 2 weeks or so, again it becomes normal. Poor Bell's phenomena is considered a classical contraindication for any ptosis surgery. Nowadays, with the advent of silicone rod, we can do a ptosis surgery with planned undercorrection and obviously checking cornea in post-operative days. So this is how Bell's is checked. ELIF test, it is used in children. You just invert the lid in down gauge and ask patient to look in primary gauge. Normal levator function lid will revert to normal position immediately, but if levator function is poor, it will not revert to normal position immediately. Congenital complicated ptosis, synkinetic ptosis, I have already talked about it. Marcus-Gunn jaw-winking ptosis, ptosis with DEP, and blepharophimosis syndrome. Marcus-Gunn jaw-winking ptosis, 5% of all congenital ptosis. Here you get innervation of third nerve, which is getting fibers from fifth nerve. So what's happening here is fifth nerve stimulation by pterygoid muscle action causes excitation of third nerve branch which supplies levator. So we have got rhythmic jerking of upper eyelid on opening of mouth or on jaw movement. So patient is having ptosis in right eye. On opening of her mouth, you can see lid is getting lifted up. Similarly, on contralateral movement of jaw, again lid is having lift. There are two groups of Marcus-Gunn, external pterygoid and internal pterygoid. External pterygoid, when lid get lifted up on external pterygoid action, like on jaw movement and on opening of jaw. Internal pterygoid, lid get lifted up on clinching, mouth clinching also. This is internal pterygoid. Then there is an entity known as inverse Marcus-Gunn phenomena, also known as phenomena of Merritt-Aman. This is an MCQ question. Sometime you do get this question. What happens here is that instead of ptosis, instead of retraction, you get ptosis on mouth opening. So basically opposite of Marcus-Gunn, nothing great. In Marcus-Gunn phenomena, you get lid lift on mouth opening. Here you get ptosis on mouth opening. Then you have got double elevator palsy also. This particular patient is having Marcus-Gunn along with double elevator palsy. You can see left eye is moving up, but right eye is not going up. So this is double elevator palsy, which you get associated with ptosis sometime. Then Marcus-Gunn is also graded as mild, moderate, and severe. Mild if it is around 2 millimeter or so. Moderate if lift is between 2 to 5, and severe if it is more than 5. I think I'll have to rush through because my time is already up, I believe. I will take only 2 minutes more. Blepharophimosis syndrome, also known as Cohen-Samanis syndrome. There is a classical tetrad, ptosis, phimosis, as the name itself suggests. What is phimosis? Narrowing of horizontal palpable fissure. Then telecanthus, this distance is more, intercanthal distance is more, and epicanthus inversus. There is a lid fold which runs from upper eyelid to lower eyelid. This is known as epicanthus inversus. Then there are minor features also. In examination, there are certain other points other than the routine ptosis examination which we had discussed. In blepharophimosis syndrome, additionally, you have to measure the horizontal palpable fissure because there is phimosis. Also, you have to check intercanthal distance, ICD, distance between two canthi, and also IPD, distance between two pupils. Normal IPD to ICD ratio is more than 2. If a patient is having 55 millimeter of interpupillary distance, then his or her intercanthal distance would be less than 27 millimeter. It will be either 25 or 22 or whatever it is. So this ratio should be more than 2. But in telecanthus, this goes other way around. This becomes less than 2. If IPD is 60 mm, then in telecanthus, ICD would be more than 30 mm. So it will be either 32 or 33 or 35, whatever it is. So this signifies your telecanthus. Then causes of acquired ptosis, I will not discuss these things in detail. Horner syndrome, you all know. There is ptosis, meiosis, anhidrosis, etc. Phenylephrine test should always be done in mild ptosis, in Horner's and even otherwise also, because this test indicate whether a person's Muller's muscle is acting or not. If you want to do a surgery on Muller's muscle, then phenylephrine test should be always positive. How it is done? You instill a drop of drosin into the eye and lid will lift up by 1.5 millimeter or more. If it is getting lift up, it means Muller's muscle is viable, functional, and conjunctivo-mullerectomy as a surgical procedure would be successful. If this is negative, then no point doing surgery on Muller's muscle, and you will have to do some other surgery either on levator or fasciella cervata. Myogenic ptosis, host of these causes. Myasthenia gravis, fairly common causes. There are certain findings here in myasthenia, Cogan's lit twitch sign. Then there are certain tests which are done, RNS test, repetitive nerve stimulus test, EMG, adrophonium or neostigmine test, ice pack test, etc. These are done. Ptosis get worsened with fatigue. Ice test, very simple test. You apply ice packs and check lid lift after say 5 minutes or so. And in myasthenia, you will having improvement in ptosis after applying ice packs. This is because acetylcholine esterase breakdown of acetylcholine decreases because of this cold. Tensilon test, you inject tensilon or physostigmine, but in India it is not available. We do neostigmine test. One important point is that neostigmine test is done intramuscular while tensilon test is done intravenous. So you must always remember this, and maximum dose of neostigmine is 1.5 milligram. Sometimes people said tell anesthetists to do neostigmine test. They give normal anesthetic doses of neostigmine which goes in 5 to 10 milligram, and then patient gets all sorts of twitching and everything on the faces and involuntary muscular contraction, because in anesthesia they give it as a reversal agent to reverse the effect of other lytic agents, but here we are not giving it as a reversal agent. Always one has to give atropine beforehand, or you can keep atropine ready. Then one very important entity known as CPO or chronic external progressive ophthalmoplegia. Sometimes it is associated with pigmentary retinopathy and heart defect, conductive heart defects. There it is known as Kearns-Sayre syndrome. Aponeurotic ptosis, we have already discussed it. So to conclude, a thorough evaluation of ptosis is a key to proper management, and if you do shortcuts, sometime you may end up in trouble. So always pertinent to do a proper ptosis examination in detail. Thank you. Thank you for your patience here.